Hello, this is the bedtime story, and my name's Shusie Kennedy. But before we settle down and listen to the story, let's have a bit of a wiggle, shall we? Are you sitting comfortably? Are your hands twitchy? Yeah? Let's just have a little wiggle, okay? Are we comfy? Let's begin. The story is called Cornfields and Wheatfields. The sun had been shining for several days and the ground was dry. The wheat was standing up straight and swaying gently in the breeze. The forecast over the next few days was just the same, but with wet weather coming along in about 10 days' time. Sophie, who was 10, and Tom, who was now 8, were the children of the farmer, Tom Andrews. They had lived all their life on the farm, and they knew all about the time for the corn and the wheat harvest. The huge machine for cutting the crops had arrived yesterday, along with its driver, who stayed overnight at the farmhouse. Very early in the morning, around 6 a.m., the children could hear the machine working as it went up and down the fields, one at a time, and cut the corn, leaving the straw lying on the ground. It had not been possible to hire a machine that did everything, including baling the straw, and so it had to be done in 2 stages, first the grain and then the straw. As soon as they were washed and dressed, eaten breakfast, the 2 children went out to watch the machine. A lorry arrived, and the grain was transferred into the lorry, and off it went to the local grain merchants, who dried it, turning it several times, and bagged it into sacks. Some of the harvest was kept on the farm to add to the food for the few cows and calves, chicken, and the goats. But the great majority was sold on to be bagged, labelled, and to become grain for other farmers, or even to the miller to turn into flour. The children were not allowed in the fields on this day, and they had to make sure they were nowhere they could possibly cause a problem or an accident. They could, however, go and feed the chickens and help their mother with other jobs. The sound of the machine could be heard for miles around, blanking out the voices of the animals, the birds, and even the odd conversation. But everyone knew all about it, and they were all very pleased that the weather had been perfect for harvest. At lunchtime, the children took packed lunches out to their dad and to the driver of the big machine, and they sat at the edge of the cut field and had their own sandwiches and a drink. Just half an hour and they were sent off out of the fields, and the machine went back to cutting, with the driver wearing a hat and sunglasses by now, as the sun was high in the sky and it was very hot. Mid-afternoon, the next machine, which was going to bale the straw, arrived, and it was driven into the cut field, ready to begin. But nothing happened. There was a hurried conversation with Dad Tom, his face looking very worried. And then the baling machine was driven back out of the farm. Well, dinner that evening was very different. For once, Dad's mobile phone was on the table, and he was talking to one after another of his friends and family. "We have to put the straw into stacks, like a haystack. We're going to have to do it all by hand," he announced, with a very worried look on his face. "Can we help?" asked Sophie. Both parents looked at each other, and Mum nodded. And Dad said, "Yes, we're going to need everyone we can to help us with this." That night, everyone went to bed early because they all knew it would be a very early start. The cockerel woke them up early, but the children turned over for a little longer. As the alarm went off at 6 in the morning, both Sophie and Tom took turns to wash their faces and get into some old clothes. And it wouldn't matter if they got damaged. Old jeans and t-shirts were what they chose. One by one, the cars arrived, with many friends and family from all over the area, many who were farming and had already taken their harvest in. Armed with rakes, they split into groups and started to gather all the cut straw into loose piles. Then Tom Andrews, the children's dad, came and started to make a round mound, putting the straw round and round, up higher and higher. The children were called over, and Sophie and young Tom were lifted onto the top of the short round pile and were told to keep stacking the straw that was being thrown up to the top. The children were joined by another farmer's 2 children, and they all worked together. Higher and higher went the big stack, and then the children were told to slide all the way down, as this one was big enough and they could start on another stack. Sophie and Tom's mum made rolls for everybody, and there was cheese, hard-boiled eggs, pickled onions, and plenty of water, clean, fresh water. She had also cut up fruit cake and had cupcakes for everyone to choose from. Other friends and family also bought flans and sausages to add to the food to be shared with everyone. It was like a party, a working party, and just like any other party, it was all over too quickly, and everyone went back to rake and pile the cut corn and the wheat. By tea time, there were 10 straw stacks, or you might have called them haystacks. Well, that is, until you got closer to have a better look. Sophie and Tom's mum brought out fresh doughnuts and tea, milk and sugar, and once again, others bought cake, jam tarts, and shortbread to add to the tea. Everyone sat around eating and drinking before going back to work again, and make even more stacks in the fields. The sun was going down by the time it was all finished, and everyone went home after having been thanked and promised a harvest supper later in the week. "Come here, children," said Dad, and Sophie and Tom went to sit either side of their dad on the sofa in the living room. With his arms around each of the children, he said, "I want to thank you both for helping all day. Without any complaints and making the straw stacks, none of us could have got up there on top and managed what you did." And then he hugged and kissed them both. It was a very special moment, and both children felt good about having been part of all the work. That night, they both climbed into bed and pulled covers over their shoulders. They felt so good. They felt very tired, but they were both pleased with themselves for managing to help. After that day, Sophie gained more confidence, and Tom felt much more grown up, as they both gained such a lot from simply making stacks of straw. But it was the working with the whole group of family and friends, being accepted for what they were, people that had not lived very long, and not children that got in the way. And apologies for the background cat. Her name is Willow.